and welcome to ESL Revolution, everyone. I am your content creator and professor, Dr. B. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, click the button, subscribe up, hit the bell for notifications. We pop out videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's right, 3 days a week for the general channel. And of course, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the actual private student channel. So, lots of stuff going on. Now, just one thing about the general downloads, I have changed the days a little bit here, okay? So, I'm going to do general ESL videos on Monday and Wednesday. Not Wednesday, Friday. Okay, just keep that in mind. Friday is going to be an open stream day. Okay, it's an open stream day. Now, this is going to encompass various different streaming activities. It could be Star Wars The Old Republic, live stream game conversation with you, my students. What's up, yo homies? And sorry, that's a little cultural appropriation there, maybe. And so it could be that, it could be a Facebook live stream, or it could be a YouTube live stream for you as my students and general subscribers to the channel. So stay tuned for that. Just a little bit of a change there. I wanted to put out videos earlier in the week rather than later in the week because, to be quite honest, by Friday I'm a little pooped out from all of the online teaching, and I wanted to do something a little bit more fun and friendly for the students on the Friday, as most of the students would not have classes anyway. So there you go, just a little channel update for you. Coffee is good. All right, so today what I want to do is I want to actually just finish off the article review that I've been doing. This is part 7, I believe, of the cultural barrier issue to language development here in Korea. As you can see, today I am a little more casual. I'm recording this on Sunday, and sure, why not? It's Sunday. I don't need to wear a shirt and tie, do I? Do I? Really? Okay. Thank you for that consideration. So there's a few things that I wanted to mention in terms of what the author has wrote here, but I also wanted to interject, pardon me, some of my own ideas as well. So let me just read this first little paragraph here, because I think it's an important starting point to this discussion. And this is kind of a more of a practical way of actually resolving some of these cultural issues in the classroom. So here we go. He says, or she says, I'm not sure actually if it's male or female, so he or she says, cultural change takes a considerable time because change in the value system must be accompanied. Korea is a hybrid society where collectivism and individualism are intermingled, but relatively skewed more toward collectivism. English teachers can't just sit back and wait until the ideal English-friendly environment is created for us. English teachers should find ways to utilize various teaching strategies within the limited environment. Okay, so that's what the author wrote. Now, I would tend to agree with this comment, actually. I agree that cultural change takes time. I agree that Korea is a hybrid society that leans towards collectivism. And I also agree that English teachers, like myself, simply just can't sit back and expect those changes to happen, and therefore create the ideal situations in which English language can be taught and learned simultaneously. I also agree that English teachers should find ways to incorporate teaching strategies into the classroom in order to affect a better change in that. So all of those things I agree with on the surface of what's going on. However, let me just go into these things just slightly and suss out some of my own thoughts on each of these points. So point number one, cultural change takes considerable time. While I agree with that, I find that there is something unique about the way cultural change occurs in Korea. And that is, when there is a mindset to change, those things happen very, very quickly. This is a unique aspect that I've noticed in several major national issues over the last 15 years of me living here. Most notably, I would say how the culture has changed post-Sewol accident. There was, a few years ago, as many of you would know, a major disaster that occurred on a ship going to Jeju Island. This ship capsized and sunk, taking 300 to 400 people down with it. Most of those people were high school students from a high school in Seoul going on a school trip. This shocked the imaginations of the individuals across the country and drew widespread condemnation of the company, of the government, and of the response that was in charge of dealing with things. There was massive outpouring of support for the families and for widespread change in terms of how one deals with the dramatic national emergencies. Fast forward to 2020. The coronavirus hits Korea in a massive outbreak here in the city of Daegu. The response is incredibly fast. The yellow-jacketed politicians zip up and they go to work very quickly. Of course, I'm being slightly sarcastic there because whenever there's a cultural note, I guess, not of sarcasm, but a cultural note that when there is an emergency, the politicians who are in charge of particular branches of government donned these yellow jackets and in fact had those yellow jackets on during the Sewol accident. So this is a jacket, a color to symbolize the politicians' readiness to engage the problem and tackle it head on. So, that being said, that is a little side note. We could see that the government apparatus went into full swing at the time that the coronavirus really hit. Now, of course, I recognize that there were certain failures and certain things that were being worked out because the emergency was so dramatic and the numbers of infected and casualty I can't speak this morning, casualty rates were climbing. That being said, when we look at the general trajectory of, wow, I really can't speak this morning, trajectory of successes and of implementation really went fast. So we can see that from one incident where there was dramatic negligence, we go to 2020 and the coronavirus and see general successes across the board. Now, in that time period between Sewol and between coronavirus, multiple things occurred. We had the impeachment of a conservative president here in Korea that simply was not acting in the best interest of the country, at least according to what was revealed. And we do have now that president behind bars. We have the previous president, also a conservative, who is now behind bars because there was this environment that allowed for a lax, aggressive SOP, standard operating procedure, that would have allowed for the Sewol accident to have and the sorry, my throat's a little stuck there. The rapid response of the government would have been much faster had those policies not been put in place at an earlier stage. Things could have been done much faster. Fast forward to now. We have a situation where the government, I believe, really learned from those mistakes. The current Democratic president was able to address and affect radical change much faster. Obviously, there's caveats, there's rules to the exception. Certain things failed or did not materialize as quickly enough, but on the whole, I think there was a pretty big success rate. Now, that's what I'm talking about in terms of the way that the culture of change can occur in Korea. Change can occur extremely quickly. This whole country, all of South Korea is, as Koreans will constantly remind foreigners, the miracle on the hand. This rapid modernization that only took 30 to 40 years, and we have this huge shift in the way that Korea sits today in the world. Why? Because of rapid change. Now, one thing that is a part of this whole issue of change has to do with not only a structural mindset, a structural change in terms of how the society itself is ordered, but also individual mindsets that play a role in that. If, for example, people do not take into account the nature of English language as EFL, not ESL, that's the first thing, but also the reason why this language is taught in the first place. This should not be a consideration simply for KSAT score, but for something much more broader in terms of the way that that language can shape an individual going forward. There are things that English teachers and people who come into Korea can provide students from an early age all the way up to a university level that I don't think can be brought about quite the same way within a Korean context. All right, and I've talked about some of those things in a previous video. Most notably, my feedback, my constructive feedback on some of the things that this author talked about, and that was a couple of videos. I'll link it up here for you. So that's one thing, that while it's true that change does take time, Korea is unique in the way that it can spin on a dime, as they say, and affect rapid change. The second point I would like to make is the idea of a hybrid society, this notion of the individual versus the collective. Now, let me just make a point here by saying that this article actually is, when was this? This was, I think it was 2000, when did this, I don't remember when this came out here. Where's the date? It's in here somewhere, and I don't remember where it is. But let's say it's been, near as I can remember, it's been at least 10 years since this article has come out. Now, It is true, I think, that Korea as a whole, generally speaking, still remains a hybrid culture, this confluence between collectivism and individuality. However, what is unique about Korea right now in 2020 is the really fast movement toward individual culture as opposed to a collectivist culture. We have a massive generational gap that is beginning to occur. We have a large number of young people under the age of 30 who are not or do not want to get married. Why? Because they don't see that as a benefit toward them anymore. The pressures that that are being put on them are keeping them from doing those things. Not only social pressure, but also economic pressure. The job instability in Korea is quite high, especially under the age of 30. The move toward longer times in university to go not just to bachelor's degree, but also graduate and even PhD, spending more time in university is putting off those family obligations. The number of single household families in Korea over the last 2 to 3 years has risen dramatically. This plays a role in, I think, a generational shift between these two cultural mindsets. Anything over 40 to 50, you're probably going to have more of a collectivist idea. If you are 35 and under, you're probably going to be in that individualist mindset. Your your dog or your cat is your new family, not a boyfriend or girlfriend, not a husband or wife. It is quite dramatic. So that's a note on that. The third point, English teachers can't just sit back and wait until an ideal environment is created for us. This I agree. We must, as English teachers, whether you are Korean English teachers or NETs like myself, you must be forward thinking in creating your classroom. You must be the change agent within the classroom in order to affect how English is taught. We cannot sit by and simply accept or expect someone else to do the job for us. And there are many different ways of developing a classroom methodology that will encourage that kind of conversation. I think moving away from the idea of ESL into an EFL environment and trying to wrap your mind around that will provide a first big step to those in the classroom. Again, whether it's Korean English teacher or native English teacher, doesn't matter. Second thing that I would be aware of, and I've talked about this before, is problem-based learning. The textbooks, for the most part, are ESL focused and are not going to help the students grapple and wrestle with the issues of English in their classroom. It is simply not suited for that. Getting into problem-based learning will affect a much greater change because it will give the students the opportunity to deal with real-world problems that are out there right now. They can use their L1 and their L2 simultaneously. L1 is Korean, L2 is English. And they can sit in a classroom and speak to their partners and their groups for 15 or 20 minutes if they need to in Korean. That is not a problem. Because, of course, this is an EFL environment, not ESL. So that's a couple things I would point out there. And of course, the ideas of using various teaching strategies in their classroom environment. Now, I've used primarily 3 strategies as I've taught. The first is more kinesthetic learning, which is physical learning coupled with book learning at younger levels in order to engage the physicality of the moment. I've used communicative approaches before at university, and now I'm using PBL. PBL, this is still a work in progress. And because we are outside of the normal environment doing online learning, I am trying to incorporate that new learning into an online scenario. So I'll keep you informed as to how that goes. So what are some specific things that we can do? First of all, get into interactive learning. Get into group learning. The idea of simply memorizing and reciting and repeating what the teacher is saying, that is not going to aid in the development of their learning. It's simply not. Sure, you can memorize all the rules of grammar you want for a test, but when it comes time to real language acquisition and communicating with other people of that language, that sort of thing is simply not going to be effective and has been proven time and time again to be completely ineffective in the English classroom. Why? Well, from personal experience, I can say that somebody might be very good at grammar, but when you go and ask them how their day is or how their weekend is, they simply stumble all over their tongue. So that's one issue. Now, he says here, the author says here, that we should be hiring more English teachers. I agree and disagree with this. I agree. I think more English teachers would be helpful, but I also think that we should actually begin utilizing the strengths of new Korean English teachers in the country to bring about a curriculum change and a focal change into the classroom. I have heard repeatedly from new teachers who have come out of Teachers College with all sorts of new curriculum ideas, and what happens? They get into the school and they are forced to use what has gone on in the past. This is an utter failure as far as I'm concerned. A teacher who is an English teacher who 15, 20 years has quite frankly operates on an outdated curriculum and operates on an outdated mindset. The new methodologies that are brought into the classroom by new Korean English teachers can have a massive impact on the way teachers actually do their jobs in Korea. Let them go. Let them utilize those that wealth of knowledge in a elementary, middle school, and high school classroom to bring about substantive change. That is one thing that I would absolutely recommend. Second thing, in terms of more English teachers, like me, more native English teachers, yes, but with a caveat. Let's be more discriminating about who we bring over rather than just bringing anybody over for the sake of it. 10 or 15 years ago, anybody who was breathing could come into Korea and teach English. And while the numbers went up, it didn't necessarily create substantive change. Now, a few years ago, the ministries of education across the country began to scale back and remove some of the dead weight that was occurring with native English teachers. They did, however, keep the ones that they felt were the best of the best and utilize their skills far more advantageously in the classroom. This, I think, is a very positive outcome. Discerning who could do a good job. Right now, you have a glut of teachers overseas, in the UK, in Canada, in the United States, who either can't find a job or don't want to work in that environment. They are certified teachers. Let's bring them over. So that's what I would recommend. Don't just bring anybody over. Make sure you're bringing the best quality people over and are trained as teachers. Let's see. What else should I Okay, so here's another thing that the author writes. Facilitation of English, only English areas. Now that it is difficult to speak English because of various English-speaking unfriendly factors mentioned, English-only areas should be provided and facilitated in each school. The OEAs should be staffed with a native English teacher or Korean English teachers. English music is played all the time, and the students must speak English there. They will serve as limited ESL environments, and students can get feedback on what's been covered in class. Yes and no on this one. Now again, this sort of this article was written a good 10 years ago when OEAs first started to kind of come into the classrooms and the schools and different areas. But I can tell you for the most part that this probably did not work to the best effect. Sure, there's a whole new construction project going on in an elementary school, let's say. They've got this nice English zone. They've got pictures and all sorts of things up on the walls and on the screens, etc., etc. But fundamentally, it is an ESL environment. They're using ESL books, not EFL. And they have not really flipped the whole environment in the best way that they can by incorporating proper teaching techniques. So while on the surface these things have been done and massive amounts of money have been used, I don't think that these areas have been particularly good. The focus must come down to how the teacher is qualitatively and quantitatively engaging methodology in the classroom. And I think that will be a big hit first. English teachers as cultural mediators. Now, this one I would probably agree with. The students can teach Korean culture to the teacher, and the teacher can teach foreign culture to the students. Language is a cultural mediator. It is. And we can teach them what that language is, but we can also teach them how to function in that class, in that culture. Why? Because we do have more and more younger Koreans and their families going off during summer and winter vacation, traveling to other parts of the world where, in large part, English language is a spoken language. So this is something that really does need to be done. You can have those sorts of interactions by informing the students what that culture is and isn't. Some things that we see on TV may not be day-to-day culture, so we need to teach them those things. Now, here's another thing that I think is interesting. Let me read this sentence. Korean English teachers are also accustomed to Confucian teaching methods and may have negative attitudes towards students who take individual initiatives, participate in class aggressively, and challenge their ideas. This is something that must occur. The Korean teachers need to be aware that when you are dealing with a language, you need to set aside your Korean cultural biases about the classroom and engage them in a way that is so dramatically different that they will see that English is a uniquely functioning operational language. To come into the classroom and expect Korean students to learn the language when the Korean English teacher is not actually using it all that often in the classroom really sends a negative message. And more importantly, a student that wants to talk back to the Korean English teacher, not necessarily in a disrespectful manner, but able to challenge the teacher in certain things to provide their own insights only to be clamped down, again, is going to facilitate that removal of that student in the classroom, and therefore nothing is going to really change. That is another dramatic aspect on the Korean English teacher side that can change. So there is this nature of flexibility that does need to occur for both Korean English teachers in terms of allowing these expressive ideas to occur, but also on the native English part to be aware of this hybrid collective individual culture that occurs in the classroom and be prepared for that. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about today. That's kind of finishing off this article. Now, all of these last few videos are simply an introduction, ladies and gentlemen, to the idea of tips and hints in the teaching classroom. So from now on, what I'm going to be doing is providing practical analysis and methodology and different approaches that you can use at various levels of your teaching, depending on whether you're teaching at elementary all the way up to university, and what you can do in order to affect a real positive change in your classroom with not only your students, but also with your Korean co-teacher counterparts. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend of what is remaining. Thank you. And remember, hit the button, stay subbed, hit the notification button, and you will hear that little bing when I upload new content. Thank you, everybody. And remember, be the revolution. Peace, everybody.